The wind screamed like it was alive, tearing through the narrow mountain road and swallowing everything in white. Snow slammed against the windshield as headlights cut weak tunnels through the storm. Inside the luxury SUV, the billionaire tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. Beside him, his young son pressed his face to the glass, eyes wide with fear and wonder. They should have turned back an hour ago. Then the boy saw her. "Dad, stop, please!" The brakes screeched as the car slid sideways, stopping just in time. Through the swirling snow stood a woman, barely upright, her coat too thin, her body bent forward as if she were carrying the weight of the storm itself. In her arms, wrapped in mismatched blankets, were two tiny babies. Their cries were faint, almost lost in the howling wind. The billionaire stepped out into the storm, the cold biting through his expensive coat in seconds. Up close, the woman looked even worse. Her face was pale, lips cracked and blue, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Snow clung to her hair and eyelashes. "Ma'am," he shouted over the wind, "what are you doing out here?" Her knees buckled. If he hadn't grabbed her, she would have collapsed into the snow. I had no choice," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The house, no heat. The landlord locked the door. I needed help." One of the babies whimpered weakly. The billionaire's son climbed out of the car despite the cold. "Dad, they're freezing." That was when the man said the words that would change all their lives. "Come with me." Inside the SUV, the heater blasted warm air, fogging the windows. The woman shook uncontrollably, clutching her babies as if the world might still try to steal them. The boy handed her his scarf, carefully tucking it around the infants. She looked at him with disbelief, tears sliding down her cheeks. "My name is Sarah," she said softly. "I'm a widow. My husband died last winter. Since then, everything keeps getting worse." The billionaire, whose name was Adam, didn't speak at first. He watched her, watched how she kept checking the babies' faces every few seconds, counting breaths. He had wealth beyond imagination, yet he had never looked at anything with that kind of desperate love. They drove to the nearest town, but the storm blocked the roads. Hotels were closed, power lines down. Adam made a decision he never expected to make. They drove to his mountain estate. When they arrived, staff rushed to help, startled by the sight of the exhausted woman and her babies. Warm towels, hot soup, doctors on call. Sarah cried openly as the babies were checked and declared safe, just severely cold and hungry. For the first time in weeks, she slept. The next morning, sunlight glittered off fresh snow like nothing bad had ever happened. Sarah woke in a soft bed, panic rushing through her until she heard the babies breathing beside her. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Adam visited later, awkward and unsure. "You can stay until the storm clears," he said. No pressure. Days passed, then weeks. Sarah learned that Adam was one of the wealthiest men in the country, but also one of the loneliest. His wife had died years earlier. His son, Noah, rarely smiled before Sarah arrived. Now the house was filled with baby laughter and small chaos, but challenges didn't disappear just because the walls were warm. Sarah struggled with pride. She felt like a burden. She tried to clean, to help, to disappear into usefulness. Adam struggled with guilt. He had spent his life building wealth, while people like Sarah froze outside locked doors. Noah struggled with fear, afraid that one day she and the babies would vanish like his mother did. One evening, Sarah overheard staff whispering that she was only there because of pity. That night, she packed her bags. Adam found her at the door, babies bundled once again. "You're leaving," he said quietly. "I don't belong here," she replied, tears shaking her voice. "I don't want charity." Adam looked at her for a long moment, then said something unexpected. "Neither do I. I want purpose." He told her about his plans to open shelters that actually worked, homes for widows, programs for single parents. "But plans mean nothing without people who understand pain," he said. "Stay. Help me build something real." Noah stepped forward, holding one baby's tiny hand. "Please don't go." Sarah stayed. Months later, the storm was just a memory. Sarah wasn't a guest anymore. She became a partner in Adam's foundation, her lived experience shaping real change. The babies grew strong. Noah grew kinder. Adam grew human again. One winter evening, snow fell softly outside the same road where they first met. Adam stood at the window watching families arrive at a newly opened shelter, warm and safe. Sarah stood beside him, smiling. Sometimes one moment in a storm is enough to change everything. Winter did not leave gently. It lingered, testing everyone's strength, especially those who had once lived without shelter. While the world outside Adam's estate slowly returned to normal, a different storm was building inside the house. Sarah tried to find her place in a world that was never meant for someone like her. Every polished floor reminded her of where she came from. Every soft blanket whispered that this comfort was borrowed, not earned. She woke before dawn each day, caring for the babies, determined not to be seen as helpless. She cooked, cleaned, learned names of staff members, and avoided Adam whenever possible. Gratitude lived in her heart, but fear lived there too. Fear that kindness always came with an end date. Adam noticed the distance. He noticed how she flinched whenever money was mentioned, how she refused new clothes, how she kept her old torn coat folded neatly in her bag like a reminder of reality. He saw himself in her silence. He had mastered success, but he had never learned how to heal. One afternoon, Adam took Sarah with him to the city. Snow still covered the streets, but life had resumed its rushed rhythm. He showed her an abandoned building near the river. Broken windows, cracked walls, cold and forgotten. "This is where it starts," he said. Sarah looked confused. "Starts what?" "A place where no mother will ever be locked out in a storm again." Tears filled her eyes, but she stayed quiet. She had heard promises before. Words were easy. Survival had taught her that. Then reality struck hard. News spread fast. Media discovered that a poor widow and her babies were living under the billionaire's roof. Headlines twisted the truth. Some praised him. Others accused Sarah of manipulation. Online comments were cruel, calling her opportunistic, questioning her past, attacking her dignity. Sarah stopped leaving her room. The babies sensed the tension, crying more often. Noah grew angry, snapping at teachers and staff. Adam felt rage boiling inside him, but for the first time, money could not silence pain. One night, Sarah finally broke. "I should leave," she told Adam, her voice empty. "Your life was easier before us." Adam sat across from her, exhausted. "My life was empty before you." He told her about his childhood, raised by caretakers, surrounded by wealth but starving for warmth. He told her how he built an empire to prove his worth, only to realize too late that success without compassion was another kind of poverty. "I don't want to rescue you," he said. "I want to stand beside you." The next morning, Sarah made a decision of her own. She stepped in front of cameras for the first time. She didn't beg. She didn't defend herself. She spoke calmly about cold nights, locked doors, invisible people. She spoke for mothers who had no voice, for babies who had no blankets, for widows who carried grief and shame together. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Volunteers came forward. Stories surfaced from people who had suffered silently for years. The abandoned building by the river transformed into a shelter filled with light, warmth, and hope. Sarah stood at the entrance on opening day, holding her babies. Noah held scissors, cutting the ribbon with a proud smile. Adam watched from behind, tears in his eyes, knowing that this was the first thing he had built that truly mattered. The storm that once nearly took Sarah's life had become the reason hundreds would survive. And for the first time since losing her husband, Sarah felt something she never expected again: safety.